One of the funniest things I find about this whole anti-China tirade that the media has been on recently, ever since it's become a growing global superpower, is that even if you take some of the worst propagandized depictions of China, I'm talking about Radio Free Asia, Comrade depictions about millions of Uyghur people within re-education camp, a state with a social credit score, and absolutely no democracy. It is still 100% the better alternative to America. I mean, this country has some of the highest prisoners. I mean, this country has the most prisoners on earth. More than the Soviet Union during the height of the Great Purges. And there is no external threat or paranoia running through this society to have caused this. This was completely a political action done to lock up people of color by Reagan and Nixon so that they could eliminate a voting bloc that typically wouldn't go for their politics. This country has murdered millions upon millions of Muslims in their greedy lust for oil. China, under the most propagandistic interpretation by Adrian Zen's Comrade, might be taking millions of Muslims into re-education camps, but at least they're not bombing them to smithereens so that they can take their oil resources, raping women and bombing hospitals and school buses full of children. China has not invaded a nation since the 70s. And China, even if it is not a democracy, would be the exact same as America because we're not a democracy. Study after study has shown that overwhelmingly what the majority of the populace wants does not get passed through Congress. It's what billionaires want. And in fact, reasonable legislation pulls overwhelmingly well with the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans agree that climate change is real. The majority of Americans want universal health care. But that's never going to happen. Because this isn't a democracy for working class people. This is a democracy for the bourgeoisie. And a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And of course, at the end of the day, China is in reality a much more nuanced and real place on Earth. It is not the 1984 dystopian nightmare depicted in Radio Free Asia articles and China Uncensored videos funded by cults like the Falun Gong. Let me ask you this. Why is China scary and authoritarian and America is a free democracy? Our country is no less authoritarian than any other. There's plenty of policemen that crack the skulls open of people. As I mentioned before, we have one of the highest prisoners per capita in the world. So many, in fact, that Stalin, the front page man of authoritarianism for many liberals, couldn't even beat us in terms of arresting and jailing so many people. But for whatever reason, the yellow and brown and black and Latino nations of the world are authoritarian, and the Western nations are the free ones. Sounds about white.